When you notice your legs and ankles becoming swollen, the underlying issue boils down to two fundamental problems. Either your body's tissues are releasing too much fluid, or your internal circulation system isn't effectively returning that fluid back where it belongs. In most situations, you're actually dealing with both of these problems simultaneously. While temporary remedies like wearing compression garments, propping your legs up, or getting massage treatments might provide short-term relief, they're merely addressing the symptoms rather than tackling the underlying causes of the fluid leakage and circulatory dysfunction. Welcome to today's discussion, where we'll explore the most effective approach to reducing leg and ankle swelling by addressing both the tissue leakage problem and the malfunctioning circulatory pump. To truly grasp what edema is and how it develops, we first need to examine the three distinct fluid compartments that exist within your body. Our bodies contain countless trillions of cells, and everything contained within these cells is classified as intracellular space. This is where your genetic material and enzymes reside, and where all your cellular manufacturing processes occur. Separately from this, we have the vascular system, your bloodstream, which serves the critical function of transporting and distributing nutrients, enzymes, and vitamins throughout your entire body. The third compartment exists outside both the cells and the bloodstream, known as the extracellular or interstitial space. Fluid naturally moves between these compartments through two types of transfer. Cells can release fluid into the surrounding interstitial space, and the bloodstream can also release fluid into this same area. Neither of these processes is inherently problematic. They're completely normal physiological functions. Approximately 2/3 of your body's total fluid volume exists inside your cells. The remaining third is divided between the interstitial fluid and your bloodstream, with your bloodstream accounting for roughly 5 to 7% of your total body fluid. This means that approximately 20 to 25% of your body's fluid naturally resides in that extracellular space. And this is perfectly normal. The problem develops when excessive amounts of fluid leak into this space and when that fluid isn't being properly returned to circulation. Your lymphatic system is designed to collect this excess interstitial fluid and channel it back into your bloodstream. This process is essential for detoxification and maintaining proper fluid balance. The lymphatic system essentially gathers waste materials from the interstitial space and deposits them back into your bloodstream, where your kidneys and liver can filter and eliminate them. Two critical pumping mechanisms need to be understood here. The first is the sodium-potassium ATPase pump, which is powered by ATP energy and an enzyme called ATPase. This microscopic pump exists in hundreds of copies on each individual cell membrane. The pump maintains a specific balance where most sodium remains outside the cells while most potassium stays inside. When cells begin leaking excessive fluid, it's frequently because there's insufficient potassium to draw fluid back into the cell. Even though this pump actively expends energy to maintain these concentration gradients, its importance cannot be overstated. These tiny pumps collectively consume approximately 30 to 40% of your body's total energy expenditure. In your nervous system, these pumps regulate sodium and potassium to transmit signals. In your kidneys, the same pumps manage electrolyte balance for different purposes, but they're still working to maintain crucial concentration gradients across cell membranes. The second pump is your lymphatic pump, which operates quite differently from your heart. While your heart is a powerful, dedicated muscle that forcefully pushes blood through your arteries, the lymphatic pump is more diffuse and relies on pressure differences throughout your body. For instance, breathing creates pressure changes that help move lymphatic fluid upward and back into your vascular system. Edema occurs when fluid accumulates excessively in the extracellular space. This happens when there's too much leakage from either cells or blood vessels, or when your pumping mechanisms aren't functioning efficiently. But here's the crucial question. What does edema actually signify beyond being uncomfortable or unsightly? The presence of edema indicates several serious underlying problems. First, it usually signals metabolic dysfunction. There's likely inflammation and insulin resistance occurring, meaning your body has become metabolically stagnant. This represents a fundamental breakdown in your biochemistry, and it places you at significantly elevated risk for cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and hypertension. When fluid accumulates rather than circulating properly, this indicates circulatory system breakdown as well. This often manifests as varicose veins, which aren't merely cosmetic concerns. They can lead to blood clot formation, which could potentially break loose and cause strokes. Additionally, when fluid stagnates in your lower extremities, it impairs your body's ability to circulate nutrients and remove waste products, dramatically increasing your risk of developing wounds and ulcers that refuse to heal. Some sources suggest that the sodium-potassium pump is the primary cause of edema, but in reality, when it comes specifically to swollen feet and ankles, the malfunctioning lymphatic pump accounts for approximately 90% of the problem. This isn't to diminish the critical importance of the sodium-potassium pump. It's absolutely essential for maintaining concentration gradients and electrolyte balance throughout your body, and you couldn't survive long without it. However, for ankle swelling specifically, the most important factor is returning excess interstitial fluid back into circulation. The reason swelling gravitates toward your feet is simple physics. Fluid leaks from cells and blood vessels equally throughout your body, but gravity naturally pulls it downward, and it becomes progressively harder to pump that fluid back up against gravity's constant pull. Let's examine the metabolic causes that create excessive leakage. One major factor is glycation. When you have elevated blood sugar levels, you've probably heard of hemoglobin A1C, which measures your average blood sugar over approximately 3 months. When this measurement is high, it indicates chronic elevated blood sugar. But what this test actually measures is glycation, the process where sugar molecules become attached to proteins in your blood. The higher your blood sugar remains, the more sugar will bind to these proteins during a red blood cell's lifespan of 3 to 4 months. This glycation process makes your blood vessels stiffer and less flexible, which increases fluid leakage into the extracellular compartment. When you have high blood sugar causing glycation, you're also likely experiencing insulin resistance. When you consume foods that raise blood sugar, your pancreas releases insulin in response. If this happens frequently, you'll develop chronically elevated insulin levels, which creates insulin resistance. This in turn triggers inflammation, causing tissue damage and increasing that leakage. But elevated insulin does something else particularly problematic. It signals your kidneys to reabsorb more sodium. And it's that same sodium-potassium pump in your kidneys that performs this reabsorption. But it only does so because it's receiving incorrect signals from those high insulin levels. Since water always follows sodium, when extra sodium gets pumped back into your bloodstream at the kidney level, it brings water along with it. This increases the fluid volume in your vascular system, and that extra volume creates additional pressure that forces more water out into the extracellular fluid. So insulin creates a double problem. It makes blood vessels more permeable while simultaneously increasing the fluid volume trying to escape through those vessels. When you're deficient in potassium, the primary intracellular mineral fluid can leak out of cells more easily. This process also depends on adequate magnesium and certain B vitamins, particularly B1, to support the metabolic processes involved. If you're deficient in these 3 nutrients collectively, the sodium-potassium pump will fail, resulting in more fluid leaking into inappropriate spaces. A few additional factors can increase leakage, though they're less common. Low albumin levels can cause leakage because albumin is the primary protein in your blood and acts somewhat like a sponge. It's part of what makes blood thicker and helps retain water in your bloodstream. When you don't have enough albumin, you're losing some of that water retaining capacity, allowing water to leak out. Low albumin can result from severe protein deficiency in your diet, poor protein digestion and absorption, or liver disease since your liver manufactures albumin. Other forms of chronic inflammation besides insulin resistance could also cause leakage, though these are considerably less common. Now, let's discuss how to address these metabolic problems. Since insulin resistance is the primary issue, that's what needs to be fixed first. Reducing insulin resistance will simultaneously bring down inflammation. The approach involves reducing sugar intake and cutting back on carbohydrates, especially processed carbohydrates, because these are the foods that spike insulin most dramatically. You should also eliminate seed oils, heavily processed oils extracted from seeds, legumes, and grains like corn, soy, and canola. These oils are highly inflammatory and oxidized, creating oxidative stress in your body. If you have insulin resistance, you also need to reduce your eating frequency. Despite conventional advice to eat 3 meals plus snacks daily, there's no physiological requirement for this pattern. Eating constantly simply reinforces the habit and prevents your body from using its natural processes to maintain stable energy and blood sugar between meals. A much more natural eating pattern is 2 to 3 meals daily, and ideally not making food the first thing you consume in the morning or the last thing before bed. Try to fit your 2 to 3 meals into a 6 to 8 hour window. This is one of the most powerful strategies for reducing insulin levels and restoring metabolic health and flexibility. You should consume plenty of potassium-rich foods like avocados, vegetables, beans, yogurt, fish, and meat. What these foods have in common is that they're whole, unprocessed foods rather than starchy, refined products. Interestingly, the same foods that help reduce insulin and blood sugar are generally also high in potassium. Make sure you're getting sufficient magnesium, as it's one of the most common nutritional deficiencies, largely because of widespread processed food consumption. The richest sources include pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, and black beans. Yogurt also contains decent amounts. A single serving of yogurt topped with ground chia seeds and pumpkin seeds could provide 70 to 80% of your daily magnesium requirement. Ensure you're consuming quality protein regularly, as your body needs these raw materials to produce albumin, among countless other essential functions. However, many people struggle to obtain all necessary nutrients from food alone, either because they don't consume the right variety or because modern foods are nutritionally depleted compared to what was available a century ago. In these cases, supplementation with electrolytes containing potassium and magnesium can be helpful. Also, ensure adequate B vitamin intake, and if you suspect poor protein digestion, consider digestive enzymes. That's how you address the metabolic problems to reduce leakage at its source. But you also likely have a pump problem. Even with healthy chemistry producing some normal leakage, gravity will still pull fluid down to your feet if your pump isn't functioning properly. You need an effective system to return that fluid upward. The most important mechanism is called the venous pump, located in your calf muscles. These muscles actually contain valves similar to heart valves. When your calves contract, they push fluid upward, and these valves prevent it from flowing back down. This mechanism is so powerful that calves are sometimes called your second heart. When you're sedentary and inactive, these muscles don't get activated to squeeze fluid upward, and the valves don't get trained either. This can lead to poor muscle tone and degenerated leaky valves. The lymphatic pump we discussed earlier depends primarily on your diaphragm, your breathing muscle. This dome-shaped muscle sits atop your abdominal organs and beneath your lungs. When it contracts, it pushes abdominal contents downward and increases pressure in your abdominal and chest cavities. This pressure differential is the most important factor in moving lymphatic fluid upward against gravity to return it to your vascular system. However, most people have very shallow diaphragmatic breathing. During a proper deep diaphragmatic breath, your belly should expand noticeably, which most people don't achieve. Here's how to fix the pump problem. First, and most importantly, do calf raises. While there are various approaches, calf raises are by far the most effective because they create strong contractions and powerful pumping action. This isn't just a temporary fix. When done regularly, you actually retrain the valves to function properly, increase muscle tone, and improve valve elasticity and function. Practice calf raises in several ways. You can do standing calf raises on the ground, simply raising yourself up repeatedly until your muscles tire, or do seated ankle pumps at your desk. Set a reminder to flex and point your toes, lifting up and down 20 to 30 times per foot every hour. While less powerful than standing calf raises, you'll accumulate far more repetitions. At home, lie with your legs elevated against a wall so gravity assists you pulling fluid away from your legs. Then perform ankle pumps in this position. Also, incorporate walking for 5 to 10 minutes several times daily. This provides hundreds or even thousands of repetitions. Though individual steps aren't as powerful as standing calf raises, the volume adds up significantly. Several times daily, practice deep diaphragmatic breathing. Place your hand on your belly to ensure proper technique. You can do this seated or lying on your back. As you inhale, make sure your belly moves substantially. Take slow breaths lasting 4 to 5 seconds. Then, exhale over the same duration or slightly longer. This breathing pattern does far more than just pump lymph fluid. It activates vagal activity and parasympathetic healing processes. Let's discuss some conventional approaches used in healthcare settings. There's nothing inherently wrong with these methods, but understand they primarily manage symptoms rather than address root causes. Compression socks, for example, apply external pressure that counteracts gravity's force, preventing fluid from moving downward and becoming stagnant. This can be beneficial, but realize it's not improving any underlying function. Once you remove the socks, the problem returns. Leg elevation works similarly. If you elevate your legs, combine it with the pumping exercises described earlier because then you're actively making something work better rather than just letting gravity passively drain fluid. Massage can also help, and it offers additional benefits like relaxation and stress relief. In terms of fluid management, massage pushes fluid around and can help maintain drainage pathways when done regularly. However, all these approaches are temporary. They help shift fluid around but don't fix the root cause, so problems return when you stop. The absolute best and fastest way to reduce ankle swelling is to perform calf raises, elevate your legs against a wall while doing calf pumps, and practice deep breathing to activate your lymphatic system. These activities move fluid with your body's pumps while simultaneously retraining those pumps, increasing muscle tone and reconditioning your valves so they function better over time. But you must also fix the leakage problem, because if your tissues keep leaking excessively, that's the true source of the issue. As explained, this leakage indicates metabolic dysfunction and nutritional deficiencies. You need to correct that insulin resistance and those deficiencies because in the broader context, these problems predispose you to numerous degenerative diseases. Addressing both the pump and the leak is the comprehensive solution to eliminating leg and ankle swelling while protecting your long-term